Back to India Business Hour on CnbcTv18. An environment where there's a failure of buyers and sellers to find each other or consummate transactions. That's the revolutionary definition of emerging markets in the new book, Winning in Emerging Markets, authored by Tarun Khanna and Krishna Palepu. CnbcTv18 sent Chengalvara and caught up with Tarun Khanna and began by asking him about the rationale behind this new definition.
Ultimately, we are defining an emerging market simply, and I hope powerfully, as a situation where buyers and sellers have trouble coming together. And those situations, as you saw with the recent subprime meltdown and the mortgage fiasco in the United States, could happen in developed economies also.
Okay.
Now, by and large, they tend to happen more in the developing economies, the poorer countries, which happen to be the fastest growing countries today. But there's nothing conceptually axiomatic about that. It doesn't have to happen only in poor countries.
Okay.
We hope that the power of the framework is in pointing out commonalities across different situations that people may not think are common.
But what's more important? Is it the size of the market? Is it the growth opportunity? Or is it the, when I say important, in defining, or is it the lack of institutional...
None of the first set. The defining characteristic for us is simply the failure of buyers and sellers to either find each other, if you will, to have information about where the others are, or the failure of buyers and sellers to consummate a transaction with each other because they're worried about the sanctity of the contract, so they're worried that the other party isn't trustworthy, things of that nature. Okay. That's the defining character.
That's the defining. And you mentioned that all emerging markets feature institutional voids, and you go on to define 3 institutional voids that you think are very important. That's the absence of absent or unreliable sources of market information, an uncertain regulatory environment, and an inefficient judicial system. Is there any of these which are more important than the other?
Again, it depends according to different countries. So, for instance, the information about financial transactions, information about the creditworthiness about borrowers and about potential issues of equity breaks down in Korea, even though we think of Korea as being a relatively developed country, member of the OECD now. Whereas the same information is very prevalent in a place like Chile or in urban India. So that particular institutional void is more severe in Korea than in other parts.
Okay.
If you take something different, it would be more severe in other places.
Let's come to India. Which is the biggest void in India? Which do you think is the biggest void in India?
So I've been thinking a lot about this, and if I had to pick, I'd pick 2, though I'd have trouble ranking them. One is the absence of risk capital, which is endemically deficient in many developing countries.
Okay, despite a very well-regulated capital market.
Oh, we're not even close. It's so the capital market is well regulated in spaces, but in risk capital, angel finance is starting to become prevalent, but still has a long way to go.
And what's causing that absence? Is it regulatory? Is it
well, first of all, it's missing in most places around the world. Okay. So Silicon Valley, Tel Aviv, perhaps Bangalore, perhaps part of the Shenzhen area. These are exceptions, and there are a couple other exceptions.
And are you distinguishing between angel investing and private equity, or both?
Yeah, private equity I think is much more prevalent than angel investing or risk capital. Risk capital is genuinely some guy comes up to me and says, I have a great idea, give me some money, let me bank on it. So nobody is willing to put that capital at risk because there's no mechanism in place to adjudicate whether this is a good person to allocate money to, whether he or she has been through the ringer to have his idea validated, etc.
Well, that was